Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, called To The Point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
Hello and welcome to the Briefing PM, your afternoon fix of all the latest political news, debate and analysis. I'm Darren McCaffrey and this is what's coming up over the next hour on the programme. We're going to be speaking to Ian Duncan-Smith, of course the former Conservative leader, but also the former Work and Pension Secretary, about yesterday's budget, particularly those changes when it comes to universal credit, but also about France's threat to effectively block parts of the UK over fishing. That and much more in just a couple of minutes. Also today, it's Westminster's Dog of the Year. Yeah, Vivian, the pet of the late Sir David Amos, has been crowned Westminster Dog of the Year. We'll be speaking to the MP who's organised the competition and bring you all the cutest footage, of course. Look how cute that dog is in the programme. And also we'll be going to Scotland, where we had a fiery First Minister's questions north of the border. Nicola Sturgeon, of course, having to talk about how Glasgow's going to cope with COP26, which starts later this week. Train strikes may have been averted, but bus drivers are also still planning to walk out. We'll be looking at whether Glasgow is ready to host all those world leaders and tens of thousands of people, speaking to Scotland's Shadow Transport Secretary. And as always on the briefing, we want your news, views and opinions. You can email me at gbviews@gbnews.uk. Also, you can tweet me at GB News. Very welcome to the programme. Before we get started, let's get the news at 3 o'clock with Rosie White.
Good afternoon. Let's get you up to date. The mother of two sisters who were murdered by a teenager has vowed to stop him ever being released from prison. Daniel Hussein fatally stabbed Biba Henry and Nicole Smallman last June after making a pact, he said, with the devil. He's been sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 35 years. An independent report found the Met Police's response was below the standard it should have been when the girls were reported missing. Commissioner Cressida Dick offered an apology to the family, which they rejected. Mina Smallman paid tribute to her daughters after the sentencing.
I think you've heard me say in the past there'll be no celebrations here, but justice has been done. But I think we do need to review that kind of separation. When is someone an adult? And I think it's very disrespectful to say that children can't tell the difference between good and evil.
The family of the footballer, Emiliano Sala, has welcomed the conviction of the businessman who organised the flight that led to his death. But their solicitor says there are still unanswered questions. 67-year-old David Henderson was found guilty at Cardiff Crown Court earlier today. The small plane carrying the 28-year-old Argentine footballer crashed into the English Channel in January 2019, killing the player and the plane's pilot, David Ibbotson. The UK government has threatened to retaliate if France imposes sanctions on British fishing vessels after a trawler was detained. French authorities say 2 British ships were fined during checks off the coast of Le Havre on Wednesday. It's the latest escalation in the dispute between France and Britain over fishing rights. The UK's Environment Secretary, George Eustace, says threats to block and tighten checks on British boats from France and French ports could breach international law. He also confirmed that officials are investigating the circumstances surrounding French action in the Channel.
I've been able to establish so far is that in respect of that vessel, they were on the list that was provided by the MMO initially to the European Union. The European Union therefore did grant a licence. We are seeing some reports that for some reason they were subsequently withdrawn from the list. It's unclear why that might have been at the moment.
Britain faces its highest tax burden since the 1950s. Well, that's according to analysis of the Chancellor's autumn budget by the Resolution Foundation. They found that households will pay £3,000 more tax as a result of measures introduced since Boris Johnson became the Prime Minister. However, the Chancellor Rishi Sunak says his ambition is to lower taxes. He announced an extra £150 billion for public services, extra cash for hospitals, a freeze for fuel duty. Well, the Institute for Fiscal Studies Director, Paul Johnson, told GBNews that despite the upbeat tone of the Chancellor, real pain will be felt by low-income households. Extinction Rebellion protesters have been protesting at an oil refinery in Hampshire after breaking in earlier today, demanding that the UK government stops all fossil fuel investments. Two British Olympians, Laura Baldwin and Etienne Scott, have been demonstrating with them. The protesters were using pink boats to blockade the main entrance to the ExxonMobil Fawley refinery. Well, we spoke to ExxonMobil and they told us that their focus includes reducing emissions. The town of Cockermouth in Cumbria is experiencing high water levels and the Met Office are warning of life-threatening flooding. An amber weather warning was issued as the area faced persistent and heavy rain. Up to 300 millimetres is expected to fall in parts of the region, which typically sees an average of 160 millimetres in the whole month of October. You're up to date here on GB News. I'll have the latest headlines for you in half an hour. Now let's go to the briefing with Darren.
Very good afternoon and welcome to the programme, The Briefing, here on this Thursday. Now, of course, yesterday was the budget day and the Chancellor announced one of the biggest changes when it came to business rates and property tax. He's insisting that he is trying to help many of those businesses that have struggled, of course, during the pandemic. Those that have been lobbying for business rates to be scrapped altogether were disappointed. They're only going to be slashed in half by 50%. Well, delighted to say that joining me to talk about the impact potentially that will have indeed on businesses and indeed on property. We're going to speak to Melanie Leach. She is from the Chief Executive of the British Property Federation. Thank you very much indeed for joining us here on GB News. I suppose the first question is, what was your reaction to that announcement from the Chancellor yesterday, particularly when it came to that relief of 50%?
Good afternoon, Darren. I guess we're really disappointed. I mean, we've been calling for fundamental reform of business rates for a long time now, and this certainly wasn't it yesterday. We got some tinkering around at the edges, which will give a little bit of relief to the high street. And the high street's in crisis. You know, retail, hospitality, leisure firms are all trying to come back from the pandemic. And we know that we all as customers want them to be back. We want to be getting out there again. But they are stretched in all sorts of different directions. And an unsustainable business rates burden is the last thing that they can cope with. So we welcome the tinkerings, which will give a little bit of temporary relief and hopefully, a bit more breathing space. But that 50% isn't quite what it seems. It's actually up to 50% and it's capped. So it will do a lot to help in the short term some of those small businesses that bring our high streets to life, those little quirky independents and so on. But for larger businesses, that cap of £110,000, which is the maximum that can qualify, really means that this is just scratching the surface of the need to reduce that business rates burden.
So you said it's tinkering, scratching at the surface. Fundamentally, what would you have liked to have seen done yesterday, and what are you campaigning on to try and convince the Chancellor to maybe take more drastic steps in the future?
Yeah, so there's two or three things. I mean, we are not, and I don't think I've heard any lobby group arguing for the scrapping of business rates. We recognise that, business rates have a part to play in the tax system. But the burden has just got increasingly bigger over the years. So a few years ago, the rate was around about 30p in the pound. It's risen to over 50p in the pound now. So we need to get back to that sustainable level of around about 30p in the pound. That's the first thing. The second thing is that it's only revisited every few years. So at the moment, if your property is rated at a certain value, then you'll be stuck with that value for up to 8 years before you get a chance to get your business rates reset. And we say you should move to a much swifter, more modern system of annual revaluation, so that if the property drops in value, you get that cut in business rates in real time and not 8 years further on, by which time it may be far too late to be of any real help to you. So more frequent valuations to get the system working in real time and reflecting values in real time, bringing the rate down to a sustainable level, are the two key things that we're arguing for.
Where are we with the British High Street at the moment? I mean, we keep hearing, don't we, that it's really struggling. The death of the British High Street is used quite a lot. What is your sense? Have we kind of bounced back since things have reopened again over the summer?
Recovery, I mean, we did see quite a strong bounce back initially. I think we're now sort of seeing that sort of, stabilising a little bit. And of course, there's so much uncertainty around at the moment in terms of conversations around a plan B and the need possibly to go backwards slightly. And public health has to come first. But we really do need to see people continuing to return to offices in town centres, to bring the customers back to those retail and cafes and restaurants and so on, businesses in town centres that rely on that footfall. So it's a fragile recovery. It has the potential to be a really strong recovery. But at the moment, I would say we're sort of slightly holding our breaths and hoping that we can continue to build on that immediate bounce back we saw as people were keen to get out and about again and to start to come back into town centres.
Just very finally on this, Melanie, that, there are lots of people who say, we get why you need to support the British High Street, we understand that, but ultimately this is just a changing reflection, isn't it, of consumer habits, and that in the end, kind of propping things up that people aren't using is not really a sustainable long-term solution to all of this. What I'm trying to say is people physically going to shops, that's probably going to become a less and less important thing for all of us.
So we know that the number of shops in our town centres is shrinking, and that trend is going to carry on, and COVID will have kind of given a bit more impetus behind that. But shopping, physical shopping, coming into town centres to shop, to relax, to meet together, to eat together and so on, that will still be a fundamental part of what we all want to do as social animals. Our high streets in the future will be much more mixed. There'll be homes alongside those shops and restaurants and bars. There'll be community facilities. There might be doctor surgeries. So it will feel, I think, quite different and much more mixed on our high streets in the future. But I'm absolutely sure that retail will be a fundamental part of that. We will still want to shop. How shops are positioned and how they offer themselves to us as customers is changing as well. So that's much more about experience, potentially, as well as just that point of sale. So I think that's quite an exciting future. And nobody's arguing that you should prop up businesses, that certainly that government should prop up businesses that are failing. What we're asking is that the government give a fair chance to those businesses who are keen to innovate, to bring a really exciting customer offer back into our town centres, the chance to do that.
I saw that IKEA has bought up the old Topshop property on Oxford Street at Oxford Circus, so there's clearly still demand there, even from retailers we don't necessarily see on our high streets. Melanie, thank you very much indeed. Melanie Leach there, who's from the British Property Federation. Now, staying with the budgets, we have to talk about this, don't we? We have to talk about pubs and beer, and indeed wine, because British brewers have welcomed a draft beer tax cut that was announced yesterday, as have Prosecco drinkers, with their favoured bubbly tipple set to get cheaper. But for drinkers of strong southern European wines, think of your Riocas, well, they're going to be disappointed with tax on them set to rise. Well, joining me to discuss this is the South West Regional Representative of the Campaign for Pubs, Alistair Kerr. Good afternoon to you, Alistair. There's a big part of the speech yesterday, wasn't it, by the Chancellor, the changes to alcohol duties. Biggest changes, I think he argued, for around 140 years. Welcome changes overall in your book?
Oh, well, good afternoon, Darren. Thank you very much for having me. A bit of a mixed bag with the budget, if we're completely honest. We are very welcoming of the beer duty relief, the business rate relief, they're up to £110,000, 50% reclaimable. That will obviously help small independent pubs in the long run, and obviously be a welcome boost for many publicans across the country. But we are extremely disappointed and feel the betrayal that a lot of small breweries feel at this draft relief of the 5% for any beer or cider in a 40-litre container or more, which we find just discriminates against the smaller producers and the smaller breweries and the smaller cider makers, and ultimately benefits the bigger macro breweries, the big boys. So it's a bit disappointing, really. And this whole talk...
Alistair was just saying, it was just interesting there that the kegs that I think we saw Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak hold up yesterday when they went to that microbrewery in South London are the 30-litre kegs, which wouldn't actually benefit from these changes.
Yes, absolutely. Well, there was a popular saying going around that he couldn't organise something in a brewery, but yes, he was. They were both holding up 2 empty 30-litre kegs that wouldn't benefit at all, which I don't know whether that was intentional or unintentional. Obviously, I have to leave that to the people at For Pure Brewery where they went. But it is disappointing because, you know, a lot of the big boy breweries use a lot of 50-litre kegs, and they're going to benefit and they're going to get the tax relief from it when the smaller ones aren't, and ultimately going to suffer. And we've been talking to many publicans and many of the smaller kind of craft brewery bars that rely really on the 30-litre keg because of the amount of choice and the amount of variety. And in actual fact, most small breweries predominantly use 30-litre kegs. So it's a bit disappointing that the Chancellor has seemingly overlooked these small breweries and gone in favour of the big boys.
Now, we know Rishi Sunak is a teetotaler, don't we, Alistair? But not also everyone likes beer, even those that do drink. Not great news for people who like wine, particularly a good, strong red wine.
Yeah, no, it's a bit of an odd one because the Conservative budget has lowered the tax on champagne and sparkling wine, but on the higher fortified wines, it seems to be a bit of a different story. It seems to be trying to reform a very interesting, complex system of duty, but going the wrong way around it. So I think a lot of people are going to be a bit annoyed about it and a bit perplexed when they actually find when they go into a pub that things aren't going to be cheaper. They're actually going to be slightly more expensive, really.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, even when we talk about beer, I think on the draft pint it's 3p. So I mean, I'm not entirely sure anyone's going to notice 3p of a pint, and it's not for another 18 months. Just where are we at with pubs? I mean, there was also announcements about trying to provide relief to them. Clearly, they've had a very, very difficult, 18 months being closed down for a large part of that time. But there does seem to be a kind of rebound enthusiasm, people desperate to get down to the local to have a pint. Is that fair?
Oh, I mean, there's one thing that this country can do, and it's certainly drink and certainly support pubs. I think on the first weekend of reopening this year, I think 13 million people across the country, across England, I should say, flocked to their local boozer. So it's great to see that the support's there from locals and regulars. But we obviously, we've been very disappointed by the lack of government support over the past 18 months. And as you can see from the images I see on my screen at the moment, the Chancellor and Boris Johnson at Forpure, they seem to think that it's an excellent PR exercise, but in reality, these are people's jobs and livelihoods on the line, and pubs need more support. And this budget, I don't think really the consumer's going to see the effect of it, really, because we must also not forget that a lot of things are increasing price-wise. I mean, CO2 prices increase for pubs, energy bills are increasing, staff wages are increasing, staff costs. And then obviously if we look at breweries that really didn't get a lot of support during the past 18 months and only recently getting a little bit of support now, you know, hops and malt prices are going up. So, you know, in reality, this government really needs to pull its finger out and do a lot more.
OK, Alistair Kerr, the images have certainly gone everywhere, it must be said, many of the front pages this morning. Appreciate your time and your thoughts. Alistair Kerr there from the Campaign for Pubs. OK, you're watching GBNews, the afternoon briefing. We're going to stay with the budget after the break, speaking to Ian Duncan-Smith about the changes to universal credit. And also, you will not want to miss this, the Westminster Dog of the Year. Prepare for that and much more in just a couple of minutes. But first, let's get the very latest weather this afternoon from the Met Office down in Exeter.
Hello again. Yet more heavy rain expected across some parts of west and northwest UK through the rest of the day, with the risk of flooding, particularly in Cumbria and it is going to be very mild across the board because of these southwesterly winds. But this southwesterly airflow is full of moisture, and that moisture has been dumped, an awful lot of it across the higher ground of northern England as well as southern Scotland. Increasingly, the focus, though, will be across Wales and the southwest through the rest of the day. Still the risk of flooding across Cumbria because of the remaining rain to come during today, but heaviest rain expected across Wales, southwest England, some large totals, particularly over Dartmoor, as well as the mountains of Wales. Elsewhere, drier towards East Anglia in the southeast, as well as northwest Scotland and western Northern Ireland. A bit colder here, but mild elsewhere as we start the day on Friday. And further wet weather is emerging from the south. It's going to push into the eastern parts of Northern Ireland, much of Scotland seeing that wet weather move through during the morning. It turns more showery across England and Wales as it progresses eastwards. Eastern England seeing some showers, having been dry predominantly over the last few days. But some sunshine returns to Northern Ireland, parts of Wales and the southwest by the end of the day. It's a little less mild on Friday, but still temperatures above average for the time of year, and not feeling very pleasant at all where we've got the persistent rain. It continues there across northeast Scotland. Some clear spells for a time on Friday night, but further heavy rain or showers move in from the west to affect Northern Ireland, western parts of England and Wales during the night. And with all of that weather going on, it will be another mild night, but not as mild as it has been. This fairly active system greets us as we start off the weekend. It is progressing east, so it's not going to remain in place for a particularly long spell of time, and brighter skies do follow. There will be some sunshine arriving on Saturday afternoon, albeit with some heavy showers. More wind and rain to come on Halloween.
Join me, Mark White, here on GB News. For more than 2 decades, I've been at the sharp end of reporting crime and security at home and abroad. From the scourge of terrorism to the fight against violent crime and the deepening small boats crisis in the Channel. They're issues you rightly care about, and so do I. As GB News Home and Security Editor, my focus will be on the stories that matter to you.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday. Call to the point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, right here on GB News, for To The Point.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me live from 9 p.m. to midnight every Friday, Saturday and Sunday. Your weekend starts here. My show exists to do 3 things: to inform, to debate and to entertain. Big guests, big stories and big opinions. And I can't do any of it without you. It's lively and it's a little bit funny. So join me from 9 p.m. to midnight every Friday, Saturday and Sunday on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Very welcome back to the briefing here on GB News. The time, what, 25 minutes, almost 25 minutes past 3. Thank you for your company. Now, let's move to Germany because its new lower house of parliament, the Bundestag, met for the first time this week, following, of course, those federal elections last month. Now, the outgoing Chancellor, Angela Merkel, also took a step closer to political retirement on Tuesday after she received her formal dismissal certificate from the post of Chancellor after 16 years in office. However, she's not going anywhere right now. She's going to lead a caretaker government until her successor is sworn in. So who will emerge as the leader of Europe's biggest economy? And frankly, why is it taking so long? Joining me to discuss this is political journalist Thomas Barrow, who joins us from Berlin. Good afternoon to you, Thomas. I suppose, first of all, just bring us up to date with where we're at in terms of those negotiations that are taking place between the key political parties and trying to form a government. Oh, and it appears we cannot hear Thomas, unfortunately, at that moment of time, but we are going to try and essentially reconnect to him in Berlin with, when we get the sound working, to our German neighbours and talk about the election. OK, let's move on to actually another one of our top stories today that we've been talking about. That's, of course, the sentence of Daniel Hussein, the 19-year-old who has been convicted of murder of the sisters of Biba Henry and Nicole Smallman after making a satanic blood pact. Well, he's been sentenced now to life in prison with a minimum term of around 35 years. With the very latest on this is our Home Affairs and Security Editor, Mark White.
Armed with taser stun guns, the moment police move in to arrest killer Daniel Hussein.
Mate, you're under arrest. Come out. Come out the address. Keep walking towards me. Keep walking towards me. Stay where you are. Stay where you are. Stay where you are. Hands on your head. Stay where you are. Face me. Hands on your head. Stay where you are. You're under arrest, all right?
He is, it's clear, completely unfazed. A cold, callous young man who just weeks earlier murdered 2 sisters in a frenzied knife attack. Part, we're told, of a bizarre pact with the devil. This is one of the last images of Hussein's victims, Biba Henry and Nicole Smallman, a selfie taken by them minutes before they were murdered. The sisters had been with a group of friends on the 5th of June last year, celebrating Biba's birthday. As the friends drifted off home, Biba and Nicole stayed on in the Friant Country Park, dancing late into the night, until coming face to face with their killer, who stabbed them dozens of times. Their bodies were discovered almost 2 days later by Nicole's boyfriend, as family and friends launched their own search for the missing sisters, frustrated by the slow police response. After the police watchdog this week criticised that initial response as below standard, Scotland Yard Commissioner Cressida Dick offered an apology to the family. The victim's mother said the time for apologies had long gone. It is yet another deeply uncomfortable moment for the Met boss.
This brings more pressure on the Met and on the Commission's position. The way they dealt with the missing person report and how they investigated it was insufficient. They've apologised for that. But week after week, we're seeing more pressure brought on the Met. Different apologies coming out. The Commission's position under threat all the time. They've got an awful lot of work to do to rebuild trust and confidence in police in London.
Can she survive?
I think she'll survive for 2 more years. I think she's determined to see this job through.
Do you have any injuries? Yeah. The wrists from the cuffs? No. Oh.
In police custody, Hussein still had injuries to his right hand, deep cuts he sustained while stabbing Biba and Nicole.
Is this the interview? That was a question. The injuries on your fingers. What happened there?
Detectives pieced together his movements on the night of the murders. This is him arriving back at his father's house near the park. His blood-stained trousers removed, the injured hand tucked into the jacket tied around his waist. The blood from that injured hand was found all over the crime scene. This is Daniel Hussein in an Asda supermarket in the days before the murders, buying the block of knives he'd go on to use in the attack. And in a search of his mother's home, police uncovered a far more sinister aspect to this crime: satanic symbols in his bedroom. And nearby, a handwritten letter. It was a deal with the devil, a promise to kill 6 women every 6 months. It was signed in his own blood. In return, he believed he'd win the lottery and have better luck with women. Search teams even found receipts for lottery tickets purchased in the days after the murders. It's not known why the sisters were targeted. This is Biba and Nicole in a local co-op buying food and drink shortly before heading to Friant Park. Tragically, they may simply have been in the wrong place at the wrong time when Hussein discovered them. As horrific as these murders undoubtedly were, for the sisters' family and friends, there is the added trauma, not just of the initial lacklustre police response, but in learning that 2 officers who should have been guarding the scene were arrested and then later charged with taking selfies next to the bodies. Those 2 officers are due to appear at the Old Bailey next week. Their lawyers have indicated they intend to plead guilty. But for now, Daniel Hussein is beginning life behind bars for the murder of Biba and Nicole, 2 sisters who'd simply been relishing life and celebrating their freedom from lockdown. Mark White, GB News at the Old Bailey.
OK, let's go back, as promised, to our political journalist, Thomas Barrow, who is in Berlin. We lost communication signed with you, Thomas, just a couple of minutes ago. We were talking about the German elections, of course, and the attempts to form a government there. And I was asking if you could bring us up to date with where we're at with those political parties frantically talking to each other.
Well, let's hope you can hear me now. I'm sorry for that. I don't know really what happened with the sound. I was actually explaining that Germany, for the very first time, may have a 3-party coalition. Now, in other countries around the world, like the UK, it is unusual to have coalitions. But here in Germany, it is actually the norm. And normally you have 2 parties. But because the situation here is so fragmented, because the country is so polarized, it will be a 3-party coalition. There's no way round that. And those 3 parties are now formally negotiating their coalition agreement. And the hope is that there will be a government in place here in Germany by the end of the year. In fact, the hope is to have that government around the 6th of December. And by then, Germany would have a new chancellor, the replacement, the new chancellor who will replace Angela Merkel. And most probably that will be Olaf Scholz, who is the current vice chancellor and who is also one of the main political figure of the Social Democrats, the key party that won very narrowly that election in September.
And in saying that, obviously, this is a significant change in some regards, because this means the CDU, Angela Merkel's party, will not be in government, which is, they've been in government for a pretty long period of time. What will that mean in practical terms for Germany in terms of, having essentially a social democratic party leading a coalition, but also in coalition with the Greens, for example, too?
Germany for the last 16 years has been led by a centre-right party, so the CDU-CSU bloc, where Angela Merkel actually belongs to. She was the leader of the CDU for a long time. And now what has happened is that the country has moved to the centre-left. We saw that, for example, this week in the German parliament when they had their first session after those elections. I was there in the German parliament covering that. And you could see that now the focus will be more towards the centre-left of the political spectrum, led by the Social Democrats, but also with the Greens that have a larger following now than they had 4 years ago. What we can expect there in concrete terms, and that's something that was revealed by the 3 parties when they first met, is a larger focus on digital development, a larger focus on climate change protection, a larger change in modernizing the country, as they say. The big question there, Darren, is how they are going to finance all that, because these are all investments that will cost a lot of money. They have said they do not plan to increase taxes or raise taxes. So the big question now that comes with those negotiations that they're going to have in the next few weeks and months is how they are going to finance those plans that are being described as very ambitious for Germany indeed.
Just very finally and quickly, Thomas, if you can, we must, of course, talk about Angela Merkel. She's not going to away anytime soon, or certainly not immediately. She's got a G20 to go to in Rome tomorrow and COP as well. This is the final chapter, isn't it, of her chancellorship. But as I say, she's going to be around for a little bit longer.
She's going to be around until the new government is in place. So we expect her to be around until the beginning of December if those negotiations are successful. For now, you're right, she's going to take part in that G20 meeting in Rome. And it's interesting to see that she will actually go with Olaf Scholz to all of those meetings that she will have in Rome. So that includes, for example, a bilateral meeting between Angela Merkel, Olaf Scholz, and Joe Biden, the President of the United States. So this is also to ensure that that change in government, that change in power happens as smoothly as possible, even though I've already stressed that there are still challenges ahead when it comes to forming that coalition agreement. It could take some time before we have a new government here in Germany.
Thomas, excellent stuff. Thank you very much indeed. Thomas Barrow there, joining us with the very latest on the political machinations from Germany. OK, we're going to pause there on the briefing. Don't go anywhere, though. We'll bring you the cutest dogs in politics as we let you know who won the Westminster Dog of the Year. But first, let's get the very latest news this Thursday afternoon with Rosie White.
Good afternoon. Let's get you up to date. The mother of two sisters who were murdered by a teenager has vowed to stop him ever being released from prison. 19-year-old Daniel Hussein fatally stabbed Bieber Henry and Nicole Smallman last June after he made what he described as a satanic blood pact with the devil. He's been sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 35 years. Commissioner Cressida Dick offered an apology to the family after an independent report found failings in the Met Police's initial response. The UK government has threatened to retaliate should France impose sanctions on British fishing vessels after a trawler was detained. French authorities said that 2 British ships were fined during checks off the coast of Le Havre on Wednesday. It's the latest escalation in the dispute between Britain and France over fishing rights. The businessman who organised the flight that crashed and killed footballer Emiliano Sala has been found guilty of endangering the safety of an aircraft. David Henderson, seen here in the left, was convicted by a jury at Cardiff Crown Court earlier this morning. The plane carrying 28-year-old Sala crashed into the English Channel, killing the player and the plane's pilot, David Ibbotson, in January 2019. Britain faces its highest tax burden since the 1950s. That's the Resolution Foundation's analysis of the Chancellor's autumn budget. They concluded households will pay £3,000 more tax as a result of measures introduced since Boris Johnson became Prime Minister. Well, the Chancellor says his ambition is to lower taxes. He announced an extra £150 billion for public services, tax cuts for businesses, extra cash for hospitals, a softening of the cut to universal credit and a freeze for fuel duty. The Office for Budget Responsibility said the plans will take public spending to the highest share of the economy since the late 1970s. You're up to date here on GB News. Don't go anywhere. Your next update at 4 o'clock.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the political correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday. Call to the point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday right here on GB News for To The Point.
Very welcome back to the briefing here on GB News. Thank you for your company on this Thursday afternoon. Now, we're going to first of all start with potentially some very significant changes to travel coming into the UK. There is much speculation that this afternoon the government is going to announce that red lists countries, there are 7 of them, could be removed entirely, though the government seems to be suggesting they're not getting rid of the red list system altogether. What does it all mean? Let's go live to Westminster, join our political correspondent, Tom Harwood, who is outside Parliament for us. Tom, just bring us up to date with the thinking behind all of this.
Well, of course, the red list was introduced quite a long way into the pandemic, actually. There was criticism of the government for not being tough enough on borders. What does the red list mean? It means that there's hotel quarantine from those areas that are deemed to be highly at risk, from those areas with incredibly high case rates and the areas with potential new variants that the government is concerned about. And from those many countries, at one point it was around a third of countries in the world were on that red list, basically discouraging travel, meaning that if you want to come from one of those countries to the UK, you need to put yourself up in a government-approved hotel for 10 days. Well, it sounds like today all of the countries, every single one on the red list is being taken off that red list, meaning no more hotel quarantine, meaning no more thousands of pounds having to be stumped up to come to this country from one of those countries. It's a big decision for the travel industry. Although I think we should stress the government is saying that the red list will not be abolished, and it could be the case that a country could return to it. For example, if a new worrying variant were to be discovered. But it looks like today we're going to see every single country on that red list be removed.
Thank you for that, and of course we'll bring you all the details when it is announced, probably with the Department of Transport a little bit later on. Now, we give a little clue to what Tom was also coming on to talk about at the bottom of the screen there. We are going to talk about the most politically important story of the day, and that is Westminster's Dog of the Year competition. It did go ahead today. There he is. Look at those little dogs. Glorious. In previous years, the competition was championed, of course, by Sir David Amos, the Tory MP and animal rights campaigner who was tragically killed only 2 weeks ago. Well, he entered with his pet several times, but had never won. Today, though, his French bulldog, Vivian, was crowned Westminster Dog of the Year. Absolutely fantastic. Some stiff competition, as you saw there, from the many other dogs appearing. Now, we can return to Tom, who's at Westminster. And Tom, I believe you're joined by Andrew Rosendale, who helped organise all of this.
That's exactly right. It's the parliamentary highlight of the year. And you're right, Sir David Amos's dog, Vivian, won by tens of thousands of votes in the public vote and from the judges as well this year. Well, Vivian was escorted by 2 good friends of Sir David Amos, and I'm delighted to say that I am joined by one of them now, Andrew Rosendale, of course, the Conservative MP for Romford. This must be a good day for you.
It's a very proud day for me to have been asked to enter Vivian, David's dog, in the Westminster Dog of the Year contest. But it's also a day we honour Sir David Amos because he was an incredible champion of animal welfare, particularly of dogs. He was a dog lover more than any other MP I've ever come across. He championed animal welfare and he dedicated his time in Parliament really to that, many other subjects, but that particularly. So today to have entered Vivian on the family's behalf, together with my friend Mark Francois, the MP for Raleigh and Wickford. It's great to see Vivian win, and to win by tens of thousands of votes on this public vote. So it's a great tribute to David, and a wonderful, fun day for Parliament. It is, as you said, Tom, it's one of the highlights of the parliamentary calendar. MPs bring their dogs, and may the best dog win. Well, no doubt at all, the best dog, Vivian's certainly won today.
Now, this is an annual event. It happens, and we can see some of it on the screen now, actually, some of those wonderful photographs of those dogs. We can see Vivian on the screen as well. And it must be a very, very warming day, I think, probably, but also one of some sadness as well, naturally. But I suppose one of those encouraging things about today is that public outpouring, those tens of thousands of votes. I understand many, many more people getting involved this year than in previous years.
Yes, absolutely, and I think that people wanted to show respect for David Amess. He was a really loved MP on all sides of the House, loved in his constituency. I don't know if you knew David, but I've known David 40 years, and he was a very special type of MP. He was the kind of person that was really genuine and really cared, and a true friend, as I said before. So today, I think in his honour, for Vivian to have won is really wonderful. I know his family will be thrilled, and I know if David's looking down, which I'm sure he is, he's going to be smiling. And I said today, Vivian may be a French bulldog, but she's actually a Brexit bulldog, because David was very strongly for Brexit, and I'm sure Vivian goes along with his view on that too.
And I think it was a result today that everyone was sort of wanting to see. I know that one of your colleagues actually withdrew from the competition.
They did, and also a Labour MP actually would, although she's in the contest, said that she was going to vote for David's dog, so Vivian, not for her own dog. So, yeah, I think, look, no one wants the dog to win because of these sad circumstances, but I think it's everyone showing respect for David. It's showing the love for David, but also the respect for him and all the things he championed, and particularly when it comes to responsible dog ownership. The Kennel Club and the Dogs Trust run the competition. They do it every year. I used to enter my dogs. I had Staffordshire Bull Terriers, and they never won, actually, but they got special campaign awards, but they never won. So I know David, all the years he enters his dog, I think he's always, I remember him saying to me, we never win. So I really hope he can see it, and I really hope he knows that Vivian today has won for David.
And of course, this is about those two charities as well. It's not just the fun and games here in Parliament, but also really promoting the message of responsible dog ownership and all those good causes to do with a country that I think is incredibly animal loving.
100%. We are an animal loving country, but sadly, Tom, there are people in this country who say they love animals but don't treat them as well as they should. So we do have wonderful laws in this country compared to other countries in the world. We have really good laws on animal welfare, but there are people that neglect their animals. There are people that ill-treat them, and I think it's an education. Some people do it not deliberately either, so it's about educating the public about how to be a responsible dog owner, and that's the whole point of the Westminster Dog of the Year contest, that we show responsible dog ownership.
Now, you say that you've entered your dogs in the past. Will you be entering your own dogs in the future, or will Vivian make another appearance, perhaps?
I think probably you only win once. I think they do tend to spread it around a bit. I don't think the same dog can win 2 years running. So I think Vivian's got the crown for this year. I would love to enter it. I don't have a dog at the moment, but if I do get a dog in the future, and if I'm still a Member of Parliament, of course I'll be entering my dog.
Marvellous. Well, Andrew Rossendale, thank you so much for joining us here on the briefing in this afternoon on GB News. A really, really important subject to discuss.
Thanks.
Tom, thank you very much indeed. Tom Harwood there with Andrew Rossendale live from Westminster, and congratulations, of course, to Vivian on winning that Westminster Dog of the Year award. OK, we're going to move now to Scotland, north of the border, because it was First Minister's Questions. It made a return after a 2-week recess. Unsurprisingly, COP26, which starts this Sunday, dominated an extremely fiery clash at Holyrood. Let's have a look at some of the highlights.
Last night we heard that the train strikes have thankfully been averted. While it's a welcome relief for commuters across Scotland, it should never have taken to the 11th hour to secure. So can the First Minister explain why the additional funding and urgency was only found to resolve this now, as world leaders are coming to town for COP26? And why are they more important than ordinary Scots who have had to put up with this since March?
And agreement was reached, I'm delighted to say, last night. And the basis of that agreement is a one-year deal, and this is where I don't think Douglas Ross has looked at the detail. There is no additional funding in that one-year deal. The deal that was offered for the first year is the same as the one that was offered to the RMT earlier this week.
Does the First Minister really expect us to believe there was no funding involved in that? Suddenly the rail unions just suddenly decided to accept it. And I was very clear in my question, and I hope the First Minister might have taken the opportunity to apologise to people across Scotland who have faced this disruption since March. They have been waiting for a resolution for months, and only now, as world leaders are about to come to Glasgow, has this been resolved.
In passing, though, it's worth just pointing out that, as far as I understand it, and I'll be corrected if I'm wrong here, where Douglas Ross's party is in power south of the border, rail workers are getting no pay increase anywhere near the pay increase that is being offered to rail workers in Scotland. So not for the first time. There is something of an irony.
Will the First Minister reassure people across Glasgow that there will be a zero-tolerance approach to protests that disrupt people going to their work, including doctors and nurses and ambulances carrying people in urgent need of medical care?
Obviously, it is for Police Scotland to decide the appropriate approach to the policing of demonstrations. The Chief Constable, who I'll be having further discussions with over the course of today and tomorrow around this, has been very clear that there will be a sensitive policing operation that will do everything possible to facilitate appropriate and peaceful protest.
And there have been suggestions from some public figures, including one of Nicola Sturgeon's own ministers, that some unlawful protest will be tolerated. It's one thing to be frustrated by the lack of action on climate change, but it's another thing entirely to take that frustration and use it to disrupt people's lives.
First Minister, I love Glasgow. It's my home. But frankly, it's been let down by the SNP, who can't even get the basics right. Tons of waste piling up on our streets, fly tipping on the rise, and over 1 million rats. Glasgow deserves better. So while Nicola Sturgeon lectures the world about the global environment, she is turning a blind eye on the environment Glaswegians are living in every single day.
Or will I stand here and allow Glasgow, one of the greatest cities in the world, to be talked down for political purposes?
Delighted to say we're joined now by the shadow Conservative spokesperson when it comes to transports. That is Graham Simpson, who joins us from Edinburgh. Good afternoon to you, Graham. I suppose my first question is on Glasgow itself. Listening to Anna Sarwar there, my word, you wouldn't want to go. 1 million rats, rubbish piling up, buses not necessarily working. Doesn't sound very inviting, does it?
Well, unfortunately, what we got there from Nicola Sturgeon is what she always does, is when people spell out the truth about SNP-run areas, she accuses them of talking down the area. Anna Sarwar was just spelling out the facts, that we have a rubbish crisis in Glasgow, there is rubbish piling up in the streets, there is extra fly tipping, there is a plague of rats, apparently 1.3 million rats in Glasgow. You've had bin men chased down the street by rodents and been taken to hospital after being bitten. So there's no use Nicola Sturgeon hiding from these plain facts. That's the reality. And we've got the world visiting Glasgow. I suspect that they may well be kept away from Nicola Sturgeon's constituency. She obviously doesn't visit it very much if she doesn't know what's going on.
In saying that, they have managed to sort out this rail strike, haven't they?
It has been resolved. It was resolved very late last night, but we've actually had months of rail strikes. Every Sunday in Scotland, rail workers have been on strike since March. What they were threatening to do, what one union was threatening to do, was to go on strike during the entire period of COP26, so that's 2 weeks. I've been calling on the Transport Minister to get involved. He's so far refused. I think maybe he got involved last night. I also said the rail unions should ditch the strikes. Thankfully, they've seen sense.
Saying that, Graham, does Nicola Sturgeon have a slight point? You're right, there's 150 leaders going, tens of thousands of people. This is a chance to showcase Glasgow, whether you're Scottish, British, whoever you identify, it is one of our great cities. And by talking about the transport issues and talking about the rubbish and stuff, you're not showcasing the best of it to the world.
Well, we've got an SNP-run council in Glasgow, and they have been, like all other councils, underfunded by their own government for years, for the entire period the SNP has been in power. And so you've seen council services throughout the country decimated, run down, and so it's probably little wonder that you've got problems like we have at the moment. This is just the reality. It's the reality. So I want the world leaders who visit Glasgow to see the best side of Glasgow. It's a wonderful city, and I hope they do leave with a very good impression, because so they should. It is worth visiting, but it's not without its problems, and we need to be honest about that.
OK, Graham, we will be keeping across it. I have to say, I'm going to Glasgow in a couple of days' time. I hope there's not 1.3 million rats in the city or are going to be chased down the road. I'm not a big fan of rats, it must be said. But I'm looking forward to going to Glasgow.
Give me a call and I'll look after you.
Because it is a great city, as you say. Graham Simpson there, who is the Scottish Conservative Shadow Transport Secretary. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Well, that is all we've got time for on the briefing this afternoon. It must be said that I am actually going off to Rome tomorrow for the G20. We'll have full coverage of that throughout the weekend on GB News. And indeed, beginning on Sunday evening, we'll all be in Glasgow, bringing you the very latest on that massive climate change conference that is taking place in Glasgow over the next 2 weeks. Full coverage here on GB News. Don't miss that. But I'm not back tomorrow. Arlene Foster, of course, is presenting the programme from 3 o'clock. Up next, it is Alex, though, with the afternoon agenda. Stay tuned for that. From me for now, thanks for watching. Have a good afternoon. Let's get the weather from the Met Office in Exeter.
Hello again. Yet more heavy rain expected across some parts of west and northwest UK through the rest of the day, with the risk of flooding, particularly in Cumbria. And it is going to be very mild across the board because of these southwesterly winds. But this southwesterly airflow is full of moisture, and that moisture has been dumped. An awful lot of it across the higher ground of northern England as well as southern Scotland. Increasingly, the focus, though, will be across Wales and the southwest through the rest of the day. Still the risk of flooding across Cumbria because of the remaining rain to come during today, but heaviest rain expected across Wales, southwest England, some large totals, particularly over Dartmoor, as well as the mountains of Wales. Elsewhere, drier towards East Anglia in the southeast, as well as northwest Scotland and western Northern Ireland. A bit colder here, but mild elsewhere as we start the day on Friday. And further wet weather is emerging from the south. It's going to push into eastern parts of Northern Ireland, much of Scotland seeing that wet weather move through during the morning. It turns more showery across England and Wales as it progresses eastwards. Eastern England seeing some showers, having been dry predominantly over the last few days. But some sunshine returns to Northern Ireland, parts of Wales and the southwest by the end of the day. It's a little less mild on Friday, but still temperatures above average for the time of year, and not feeling very pleasant at all where we've got the persistent rain. It continues there across northeast Scotland. Some clear spells for a time on Friday night, but further heavy rain or showers move in from the west to affect Northern Ireland, western parts of England and Wales during the night. And with all of that weather going on, it will be another mild night, but not as mild as it has been. This fairly active system greets us as we start off the weekend. It is progressing east, so it's not going to remain in place for a particularly long spell of time, and brighter skies do follow. There will be some sunshine arriving on Saturday afternoon, albeit with some heavy showers. More wind and rain to come on Halloween.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.